But the thing is, I think you're gonna mess up anyway, but you're not gonna fail because you mess up. Whenever I do a video like this, I get into some sort of very tight setting and I feel like I should maybe let go of that a little more, but it's really hard, so excuse me. I think fear of the blank page is something we all experience as creatives. Whether it's a blank canvas, blank paper, blank files, blank pages, anything, it can be super overwhelming to have to like create something new out of nothing. So I want to share with you 5 tips that really help me kind of overcome that fear, or at least be able to handle it a little better, instead of just feeling blocked and stagnant and just not really moving or growing. Because I think what the fear of the blank page really is just fear of failure, perfectionism. You're just afraid you're gonna mess up or that you're not gonna be good enough. The first one I'm gonna share with you is buy cheap art supplies. If I look at what I used to do, is I still love to buy like expensive stuff, beautiful paper, amazing paints that are way too expensive. And I think that's fine if you like buying that. Like, it can also be a joy to work with that. But if you notice that you have all these pretty expensive things lying around and all you think of is, I'm gonna ruin the page, I'm gonna ruin the paper, the canvas, I'm gonna waste these pencils, the paint, or whatever it is that you're working with, then I think it's really a better idea if you just buy cheaper things. And with cheaper things, I don't mean buy bad or like crappy stuff. You can still really make beautiful things and work really well with things that are just not super expensive. For a really long time, I used to just draw in my sketchbooks. I used to buy these really pretty cheap sketchbooks, and I would just use like the most cheap pens I could find, or maybe not the most cheap pens, but they were pretty cheap, and I used to just draw with those in those sketchbooks. And the thing is, I really loved drawing with those pens. They were pretty nice. They wrote really well. They were actually pretty perfect for drawing at that time. And I really enjoyed the process of that because I had a sketchbook that I could just mess up, and that I knew if I was gonna mess up paper in that sketchbook, or if I was gonna use those pens, they were not expensive, so I could just buy them again and again, and it just wouldn't matter so much to me. And I think that is really important, because if you're not gonna draw anything because you feel like you're wasting it, then don't. Then buy something that's cheap and that you feel like you can waste, basically. My number 2 tip is keep a private sketchbook, or at least don't feel the pressure to show everything to the world online, to your friends. And I think a really good way to do that is to keep a private sketchbook. That the rule for that sketchbook is that you're not going to show it to anyone. I think a lot of the time I used to really be afraid of what other people were going to think. And I used to have like a sketchbook that I would just bring to me everywhere, but that also kept like the pressure for me really high, because I felt that I had to share it with people, that anyone could just always look into it. And it might just be really helpful to have a place where you can draw and create things that you know you're not going to show to anyone unless you decide to do that. So something that you can just keep for yourself at home. And if you would like, you can also just keep a sketchbook on the side that you do bring to other places. But if I'm a big fan of sharing things with the world. I think it's really good, but it's not good if it's gonna be blocking you. So I think it's important to just keep something maybe for yourself at first, get comfortable with being messy in it, with making mistakes, with not being so perfect in that for yourself. And maybe once you get comfortable with being messy for yourself, then there will be a point in time where you're gonna feel a lot more comfortable just sharing that with the world, because then you're comfortable with the mess yourself first. Keep something that's just for you so that you don't feel pressure to make it perfect. My number three tip would be that you have to kind of realize that imperfect is the norm. I think it is super easy to be blown away by a lot of the art we see online and the things other people make, and they all look like masterpieces. But you have to realize that every artist has a process behind a painting that looks really good. And it's usually a lot of work that actually failed before that. Or not necessarily failed, but it is not gonna be, not all work is gonna be perfect. Like the majority of what you're making, what other artists are making, are or is not like amazingly looking. There is a lot of mess, there is a lot of trying out, there are a lot of works that you may never see from other artists that are not amazing, because they're also trying things out and they're also realizing that some things work and some things don't. I mean, if I speak for myself, I don't share everything I make with the world. There are works that I made that I think, okay, I guess I made this, but I absolutely hate it, and I would not want to show that to anyone, or at least I'm not gonna show that like on my Instagram as like a nice picture. So you just have to realize that if you're creating and you're making things and you think, wow, I'm making like 10 things and none of them look great. And then you make one thing and you think, oh, I'm pretty happy with that. It's normal to have that, because yes, you're gonna make the majority of what you're gonna make is not gonna feel extremely amazing. And that's all right. So don't focus on making that perfect thing, but just focus on creating. And that also makes us come to my fourth tip, which is make a habit of sketching and creating. Be consistent with creating. I think a lot of the time, when we're focused too much on making something big or something pretty, or like making this one final masterpiece. The problem with that might also be that we're not creating enough in between. So if you're creating once per month or once per 2 weeks, that is, in my opinion, is not enough. And it doesn't mean that you have to create amazing things every day, but you kind of have to make a habit of creating, of, for example, doing a sketch session every morning, and it only has to be like 5 minutes. You don't have to make something big out of it. And I think that's the whole point. Don't make everything super huge. Just focus on doing it rather than what's going to come out of it. Because if you're going to be creating work consistently, you're going to see that, yes, most of it is not going to be looking amazing, but that is the whole point, because you're going to get comfortable with not making amazing things. And then once you realize, oh, I can take this sketch further, or this idea I really want to work out into something more final, then it's not gonna have, I mean, it's still gonna be like having pressure, of course, because you want to work that out, but you've been creating consistently, and you've been getting more comfortable with creating things that are not necessarily have to be perfect. So yeah, instead of just focusing on making one or two amazingly beautiful works in like a month or even less, or maybe a little more. You have to just focus, I think, more on just creating a lot. And then when you have a lot of small things, you can always decide that you want to create something into a more final piece. And then we're coming to my number 5 tip. And this is one that I think is really important in like also your mindset and like the more mental health side of things. And that is that you're not only as good as your last work. So I know this is a saying that people use where they say you're only as good as your last work, and I think that that is so not true. um, your last work is not saying anything about you. If you think that the last thing you created is defining you as an artist, that is so unfair, because you may have created amazing things in the past, and just thinking that like the last thing you made is like that is your skill as an artist is not true at all. Because when we're being creative, we're going through like flows of creativity, and there are gonna be times where we feel more inspired and we are able to make amazing beautiful things that we're happy with, and there will be periods of time where we feel like we're making stupid things and we don't want to share that with anyone. But that doesn't say anything about you as an artist. The important thing to remember is the whole of you, of what you made, is saying something about you as an artist. And so this comes all back to actually just being consistent with what you do, making a lot, making something every day, making something small every day. That I think is what's more important. Just looking at the whole picture, looking at the process. And I think that you should never feel pressured when you start a final piece, because that is just gonna block it. So those were the tips I wanted to share with you. They are things that really helped me, but there are obviously a lot of ways to do this. If you have anything that worked really well for you, I would love to hear it, because I think if you have anything to share, it's also really fun for other people to read. I have lots of ideas on like more of this type of content, or more like the mindset around art. So if you would like to see more of this, then give it a thumbs up, subscribe. No, but yeah, just do something or do nothing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next one. Bye. Okay, stop. Bam, bam, bam. We're starting it over. Starting it over. Absolutely terrible. It's hard talking. Okay. My